Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating. Now, I know what you might be thinking. On the surface, a 50-point internal UN toolkit designed for the Chief of Staff, Employment, and Administration at the International Civil Aviation Organization? Yeah, that sounds like a super dry, bureaucratic manual. But honestly, hidden inside it is a literal blueprint for explosive strategic insight. This isn't just a checklist of daily chores, it's a comprehensive guide on how to fundamentally transform organizational leadership. So, whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, or you're just kind of curious to understand how massive global organizations actually tick, the structured insights we're about to explore are totally going to change how you think about management.
Let me ask you a question to start us off. When you hear the words human resources or staff administration, what actually comes to mind? Do you immediately think of endless paperwork, organizational bottlenecks, and, that dark place where simple requests just go to die? It's a really common trap. So many institutions out there treat these functions as just a back-office necessity instead of a strategic powerhouse. But what if we completely flip that script?
The fundamental paradigm shift we're diving into today is moving away from this idea of a narrow administrative task and elevating it into a core strategic responsibility. This is really the bedrock of the entire toolkit. We're talking about shifting from just pushing paper and checking boxes to true strategic enablement. That means actually empowering your staff and your managers to deliver on the organization's core mission.
Okay, so here's our roadmap to execute this transformation today. 1. Beyond basic administration. 2. Integrating governance. 3. Optimizing services. 4. Digital enablement. And finally, 5. Managing risk and people. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Beyond basic HR administration. The paradigm shift.
So in this paradigm shift, leadership has to focus heavily on the strategic rationale and the intended outcomes rather than just blindly doing things because that's how we've always done them. Let's clarify exactly what that means for CAA, just so we're perfectly grounding in the sheer scope of this responsibility. At ICAO, staff employment and administration covers everything. We're talking international and local contract management, benefits, pensions, the medical clinic, and even protocol. I mean, it's this massive, complex web of services that literally touches every single employee's life and livelihood.
Now, whenever we start throwing around terms like strategic management, people inevitably start worrying that we're just going to add more red tape. But the toolkit explicitly argues the exact opposite. To quote the source directly here, the objective is not to create an additional layer of administration, but to make existing responsibilities more visible, coherent, measurable, and easier to manage. See, it's all about simplifying the steps that no longer add value, which actually makes the routine work easier instead of more cumbersome.
Moving right along to Section 2, integrating siloed governance, breaking down the silos.
One of the biggest risks in literally any large institution is having fragmented service ownership across all these different specialized units. The crucial fix for this? You have to prioritize end-to-end accountability over individual unit efficiency. Think about it. When multiple units contribute to a single outcome, let's say onboarding a brand new international staff member, the final result is the only thing that actually matters. It absolutely does not matter how incredibly fast one single unit processes their tiny piece of the puzzle if the overall outcome ends up delayed or inaccurate.
To actively track this accountability, the toolkit relies on really clear, documented frameworks. A great example is a Rossi matrix, which maps out exactly who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. By using that, alongside cross-unit forums and really clear escalation protocols, you ensure that the dependencies between different units, like benefits, medical, and protocol, are entirely mapped out. This guarantees that your decisions are fair, documented, and fully defensible, rather than everyone just pointing fingers and passing the buck.
Which brings us to Section 3, optimizing the service chain, the handoff metaphor. So your operating model really must be designed around the complete holistic service chain, rather than just zooming in on isolated transactions. To pull this off, the toolkit outlines a super clear 4-step sequence. First, map the complete process. Second, identify the handoff points. Third, establish realistic service standards. And fourth, implement structured case review. Now, management attention needs to be laser-focused on step 2, those handoffs. Why? Because it's precisely at the interface between two units or even just two people that delays happen, information gets lost, and work ends up getting duplicated.
There's this incredibly powerful rule laid out in the document. A fast first step cannot compensate for a delayed or inaccurate final result. I love this because you can just think of organizational management exactly like a relay race. Right? You can run that first leg in record time, but if you drop the baton during the handoff, you still lose the whole race.
Absolute end-to-end accountability is literally the only way you win.
But how do you actually know if you're winning? Well, you measure it through a balanced dashboard that monitors key metrics like service timeliness, transactional accuracy, and backlog aging. The toolkit gives a really strong warning against over-relying on just a single indicator. Because if you only measure speed, well, your accuracy drops. If you only measure accuracy, your backlogs are going to age out. You absolutely need a balanced approach so you aren't accidentally encouraging the exact wrong behaviors from your staff.
Section 4. Data-driven digital enablement. Tech as an organizational capability.
Treating technology as a fundamental organizational capability really comes down to one golden rule. Technology should follow sound process design rather than substitute for it. Look, digital tools are amazing. They're great for improving traceability and cutting down on manual data entry for sure, but they must never, ever replace professional human judgment, and they definitely shouldn't be used as a band-aid for a broken process. Because at the end of the day, if you digitize a bad process, you just get a faster bad process.
Because of that reality, the toolkit fires off some absolute non-negotiables for any tech implementation. You absolutely must have exception handling, strict access controls, clear audit trails, solid fallback procedures, and really robust user accessibility testing. You have to make sure that the weird, highly complex, unusual cases aren't just being forced through some inflexible automated workflow that completely ignores professional judgment.
Which takes us to our final pillar, Section 5, Managing Risk and People, Investing in Organizational Resilience.
Errors in HR and administration aren't just minor inconveniences. They can severely affect individual employee rights and totally damage the institutional credibility of the entire organization. The source identifies 4 principal risks here: fragmented ownership, data weaknesses, confidentiality breaches, and unresolved audits. Now, the toolkit stresses that these cannot just sit there as generic statements on some forgotten risk register. You have to translate them into practical controls. And crucially, audit recommendations shouldn't be viewed as annoying administrative homework. They need to be treated as genuine opportunities to strengthen your entire operating model.
But here's the thing. Controls are literally nothing without the right people running them. Investing in people strategies is how you actually build true resilience. So the toolkit recommends things like peer reviews for difficult cases, principles-focused coaching, and, absolutely crucially, cross-training to reduce single points of failure. When you do this, you build an organization that stays strong even during sudden staff turnover or emergencies. Plus, you end up shifting those difficult, high-stress cases into highly valuable learning opportunities for your entire team.
Now, obviously, you can't just snap your fingers and fix all this overnight. The toolkit practically outlines a phased approach, starting with diagnosis, moving to stabilization, then finding early value, and finally scaled improvements. By pacing the change like this, leadership can tackle the highest risk weaknesses right away and actually demonstrate real, tangible value without totally overwhelming the staff who are, just trying to keep the lights on every day.
Ultimately, what does all of this look like when it works? What is success? It's stronger compliance, much faster service, significantly fewer avoidable errors, and, at the end of the day, greater client confidence. Defining a very small number of non-negotiable outcomes just like these is the ultimate test of sustainable leadership and real, lasting institutional impact.
Which leaves us with one final, honestly kind of mic drop thought directly from the source material. I want you to look at your own organization, your own department, or even just your daily tasks today and ask yourself, are your workflows merely preserving historical practice, or are they actually producing your intended outcomes? It's a massive question, and it challenges all of us to rethink how we design the way we work. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you next time.